The examination hall was massive. 200 desks filled the room in perfect rows, and 200 cadets sat waiting. They came from 12 different species across the galaxy. Some had scales, some had fur, some had 4 arms, some had none. But today, none of that mattered. Today, they all had one job: find the threat. Una Park sat in row 3, seat 14. She was human, 24 years old, with black hair tied in a simple ponytail. She wore the same gray uniform as everyone else. She had the same tablet on her desk. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, a forgettable exchange student from Earth. She opened her water bottle and took a small sip. Then she put it down exactly 3 centimeters from the edge of her desk. Not too close, not too far. Perfect. At the front of the room stood Instructor Ven. He was a Pelori, which meant he was 8 feet tall, with dark green scales and yellow eyes that never blinked. His voice was deep and cold when he spoke. "Welcome to the Threat Assessment Examination," he said. "This test will determine which of you moves forward to the Galactic Vanguard. The rules are simple." The room was completely silent. Every cadet was listening. "Hidden among you is one individual," Ven continued. "This individual has been designated as the threat. Your job is to identify them. You have 3 hours. You may not speak. You may not use any technology. You may only observe." A Torok cadet in the back row shifted in his seat. His forearms were crossed, and his insect-like eyes moved across the room. His name was Riven, and he was top of his class. He had already started looking. "I will give you one hint," Ven said. His thin lips curled into something that might have been a smile. "The threat has already revealed itself. Everything you need to see is already visible. You simply need to look." Then he stepped back and the timer on the wall began to count down. 3 hours, 180 minutes. The exam had begun. Una picked up her pencil and began writing notes on her tablet. She wrote slowly, carefully, like a student who was nervous about the test. But the words she wrote were not notes. They were observations. Cadet Riven, Torak, 4 arms, dominant personality, will try to lead. Others will follow him. Predictable. She did not look up as she wrote. She did not need to. She had already memorized the position of every cadet in the room during the first 5 minutes. 7 rows behind her, a human male named Taeho Kim was sweating. He was 26, ambitious, and desperate to prove that humans belonged here. He had trained for 2 years for this exam. He had studied every species, every behavior pattern, every psychological profile. He was ready. Or so he thought. Taeho's eyes moved to the back corner of the room, where a Kreth was sitting. The Kreth were a predator species, massive bodies, sharp claws, teeth designed for tearing meat. This particular Kreth kept clenching and unclenching his claws. His breathing was heavy. His eyes were darting around the room. Obvious, Taeho thought. Too obvious. But still, he wrote the Kreth's seat number on his tablet, just in case. Near the front of the room, a Veth cadet named Oris was watching everyone with her large, dark eyes. The Veth were an aquatic species, adapted to see in low light and notice small movements. Oris was known for her analytical mind. She never missed details. Right now, she was watching a human male in row 5. His name was Minho Bake, and he was clearly nervous. His hands were shaking. He kept wiping sweat from his forehead. He avoided eye contact with everyone. Oris made a note. Possible threat. She did not notice Una in row 3. Why would she? The girl was just sitting there, drinking water, writing notes. Nothing special, nothing interesting. That was exactly what Una wanted. In a monitoring room high above the examination hall, 2 figures watched the feeds from hidden cameras. One was a human woman named Dara Lim. She was 32, sharp-featured, and wore the black uniform of Earth's Intelligence Division. The other was Admiral Sohn, a gray-haired man with a chest full of medals. "She's good," Admiral Sohn said quietly. Dara nodded. "She's the best we have." On the screen, Yuna was stretching her arms above her head like a tired student. It looked completely natural. But Dara knew better. That stretch had allowed Yuna to check the positions of 6 cadets behind her without turning around. "Does anyone suspect her?" the Admiral asked. Dara checked the other feeds. Cadets were looking at the Kreth. They were looking at the Dren, a shape-shifting species that kept subtly changing posture. They were looking at Minho, the nervous human. They were looking at everyone except the quiet girl in row 3. "No," Dara said, "not one." Admiral Sohn smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just won a bet that no one else knew was being played. "The Council thought this test would expose our weakness," he said. "They wanted to prove that humans don't belong in the vanguard." "They were wrong," Dara replied. Back in the examination hall, 1 hour had passed. Yuna stood up slowly and walked toward the pencil sharpener at the side of the room. Her steps were measured, unhurried. She looked like any other student taking a short break. As she passed Riven's desk, her hip bumped against it slightly. She murmured a soft apology without making eye contact and continued walking. Riven barely noticed. He was too busy watching the Kreth. But now there was a tiny tracker stuck under his desk, so small that no scanner would find it. If this were a real mission, his location would be compromised for the next 48 hours. Yuna sharpened her pencil and returned to her seat. She sat down, took another sip of water, and continued writing her notes. No one looked at her. No one ever did. Tejo glanced at her briefly as she sat down. He had known Yuna for 6 months. They had trained together, eaten together, studied together. She was nice. She was quiet. She was completely average. He turned back to watching the Kreth. If only he knew. If only any of them knew. The threat was not the monster in the corner. The threat was not the shapeshifter or the nervous man. The threat was the small, soft human who looked like she could not hurt anyone. And she was sitting right there in row 3, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the game to end. The first hour was complete. 2 more hours remained. Yuna smiled to herself and turned a page in her notebook. Everything was going exactly as planned. The second hour began, and the tension in the room grew thicker. 200 cadets sat in silence, but their eyes were screaming. Everyone was watching. Everyone was judging. Everyone was wrong. Riven the Torah cadet had made up his mind. The threat was the Kreth in the back corner. It had to be. The creature was huge, dangerous, and clearly agitated. His claws kept scratching against his desk. His yellow eyes kept moving. He looked like a predator ready to attack. Riven wrote the Kreth's seat number on his tablet with complete confidence. He was certain he had found the answer. Around him, other cadets were reaching the same conclusion. The Kreth was too obvious to ignore. But Riven was wrong. The Kreth was not the threat. His name was Gorath, and he was nervous because he had forgotten to study the night before. He had spent the previous evening talking to his family back home, and now he was terrified of failing. His claws were clenching, because that was what Kreth did when they were anxious. He was not dangerous. He was just scared. In row 5, Minho Bak was having a very bad day. He could feel eyes on him. Multiple cadets had noticed his sweating, his shaking hands, his inability to make eye contact. They were writing his seat number on their tablets. Minho wanted to scream that he was not the threat. He was just a nervous human who hated tests. He had always been like this. Even back on Earth, he would shake during exams. It meant nothing, but he could not speak. The rules did not allow it. He wiped his forehead again and stared at his desk. 3 rows ahead, Yuna watched him from the corner of her eye. She felt sorry for him. He was going to be blamed for something he did not do. But that was the nature of this test. People saw what they expected to see. They saw nervousness and assumed guilt. They saw strength and assumed threat. They never saw the truth. Yuna stood up again. This time, she walked toward Minho's row. Her footsteps were soft, casual. She carried nothing but a small pack of gum in her hand. As she passed Minho's desk, she paused. She looked at him with kind eyes and held out the gum. "For your nerves," she whispered, so quiet that no one else could hear. Minho looked up at her with surprise. He took the gum and nodded gratefully. Yuna smiled and continued walking back to her seat. It was a nice gesture, a kind gesture, the act of a gentle person who cared about her fellow cadets. It was also a test. The gum wrapper contained a contact sedative, a tiny amount, harmless in this test environment, but enough to prove a point. If this were a real mission, Minho would have been unconscious within 40 minutes. He would have trusted the kind girl who offered him gum, and that trust would have destroyed him. Yuna returned to her seat and continued writing in her notebook. Target 2 neutralized. Method, social manipulation. Time elapsed, 4 seconds. In the monitoring room, Dara Lim leaned forward. "Did she just—" "Yes," Admiral Sohn replied. "She did." On the screen, they watched Minho unwrap the gum and put it in his mouth. He had no idea what had just happened. He was just grateful that someone had been kind to him. "That's 12, Dara said quietly. 12 targets in 90 minutes. Admiral Sohn shook his head slowly. "And not a single cadet has looked at her for more than 2 seconds. It's remarkable." Back in the examination hall, a Dren cadet was drawing attention. The Dren were a shape-shifting species, and this particular cadet kept subtly changing. His skin would shift colors. His face would adjust slightly. He was not doing it on purpose. It was a nervous habit, but it made him look suspicious. Oris, the Veth cadet, was watching him carefully. She had already marked Minho as a possible threat, but the Dren was interesting too. Shapeshifters were natural spies. They could become anyone. They could hide anywhere. She added the Dren's seat number to her list. But she still did not look at row 3. Why would she? There was nothing there. Just a small human girl with a ponytail, drinking water and writing notes. Completely boring. Completely safe. Yuna adjusted her water bottle, moving it 2 centimeters to the left. This small action changed her sightlines. She could now see 3 more cadets reflected in the bottle's surface without turning her head. It was a simple trick, but it worked perfectly. She noticed that a Pelori cadet 2 rows behind her kept touching his ear. A nervous habit. That meant he was uncertain. Probably between 2 choices. Easy to manipulate. Easy to mislead. She wrote it down. Taeho Kim was getting frustrated. He had watched the Kreth for an hour, but something felt wrong. The creature was scary, yes. Dangerous looking, yes. But would the instructors really make it that obvious? Would the threat really be the biggest, scariest person in the room? He started looking at other cadets. The Dren, a quiet Veth in the corner. A pair of Torak whispering to each other with their antennae. His eyes passed over Yuna. For a moment, he paused. He knew her. She was his friend. They had trained together for months. He had seen her struggle with physical tests. He had seen her get average scores. He had seen her be completely, utterly ordinary. There was no way she was the threat. He looked away and focused on the Dren. If he had watched her for 10 more seconds, he might have noticed something. The way her eyes moved without her head turning. The way her breathing was perfectly controlled. The way every single thing she did, every sip of water, every stretch, every yawn, was exactly the same length and rhythm. It was not natural. It was trained. Years and years of training. But Taeho did not notice. No one did. Yuna glanced at the clock. 1 hour and 40 minutes had passed. 80 minutes remained. She had already neutralized 12 cadets through various methods. Trackers, sedatives, psychological profiles, compromised sightlines. None of them knew. She pulled out her notebook and tore out a page. On it she had written a complete analysis of Oris the Veth, her patterns, her weaknesses, her likely next 5 decisions. The accuracy rate would be over 90%. She folded the paper and put it in her pocket. Target 13 complete. Method, predictive analysis. The clock continued to count down. Cadets continued to watch the wrong people. The Kreth, the Dren. The nervous human. The quiet Veth. Nobody watched the girl in row 3. Nobody ever did. And that was exactly why she was the most dangerous person in the room. The final hour arrived, and the examination hall felt like a bomb waiting to explode. Cadets were making their final decisions. They were choosing their answers. They were all making the same mistake. In the monitoring room, Dara Lim pulled up the live statistics on her screen. She could see every answer being submitted in real time. The numbers told a clear story. 67% of cadets had identified the Kreth as the threat. 22% had identified the Dren shapeshifter. 8% had identified Minho, a nervous human. 3% had scattered guesses, random cadets who looked suspicious for one reason or another. 0% had identified Yuna Park. Admiral Sohn read the numbers and let out a long breath. Not a single one, he said. 200 of the galaxy's best young soldiers, and not a single one saw her. Dara nodded slowly. That's why we sent her. The Admiral said, Tell me about her background, the real background, not the file the Academy has. Dara was quiet for a moment. This information was classified at the highest level. Only 7 people in the entire Earth government knew the truth about Yuna Park. She was born on Kepler 7, Dara began, a mining colony near the Outer Rim. When she was 16, the colony was attacked by raiders. 3,000 people lived there. After the attack, only 47 survived. And she was one of them. She was more than that, Dara said. She survived for 11 days, alone in the ruins. No food, no water, surrounded by raiders who were hunting the survivors for sport. She did not just hide, she fought back. Admiral Sohn looked at the screen, where Yuna was calmly writing in her notebook. How many? 17 confirmed. She killed 17 raiders with no weapons, no training, and no backup. By the time rescue arrived, she had already cleared 3 sectors of the colony by herself. Dara paused. She was 16 years old. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. After that, Dara continued, we recruited her into the Intelligence Division. She spent 8 years in deep cover operations, infiltration, extraction, elimination. She has completed 43 missions with a perfect success rate. No failures, no compromises. No one has ever identified her as a threat until it was too late. And the Academy has no idea. They think she's an average exchange student with below-average physical scores. Dara almost smiled. Her physical scores are low on purpose. She failed tests she could have passed easily. She made herself invisible. On the screen, Yuna yawned and stretched her arms. It looked completely natural. But Dara knew that stretch had allowed Yuna to count the breathing rates of 4 cadets behind her. The Galactic Council asked for this exam, Dara said. They wanted to test whether any species could identify a hidden human threat. They have always believed that humans are the weakest link in the alliance. Too small, too slow, too fragile. They wanted to prove we don't belong, Admiral Sohn said. Yes, and instead we proved the opposite. Back in the examination hall, time was running out. 15 minutes remained. Cadets were submitting their final answers. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. Riven, the Torak, was confident. He had submitted the Kreth's seat number with absolute certainty. He had watched the creature for 3 hours. He had seen the claws, the teeth, the aggressive posture. There was no doubt in his mind. Oris, the Veth, was less certain. She had submitted the Dren's seat number, but something felt wrong. The test had been too easy. Finding a shapeshifter among 200 cadets should have been harder. Taeho Kim had submitted the Kreth as well. He did not love his answer, but he could not think of anyone better. The Kreth was the only one who looked truly dangerous. Minho Baek had submitted a random guess. He was too nervous to think clearly. He had spent the entire exam feeling like everyone was staring at him. He just wanted it to be over. And Yuna sat in row 3, writing one final note in her notebook. Final count. 12 cadets neutralized. Methods used: physical tracking, chemical sedation, psychological profiling, environmental manipulation, social engineering. 0 detection, 0 suspicion. She closed the notebook and placed her pencil down exactly parallel to its edge. The timer hit 0. Instructor Ven's voice filled the room. Time is complete. All answers have been submitted. The examination hall was completely silent. 200 cadets held their breath. Ven walked slowly between the rows, his yellow eyes scanning the room. I must say, I am disappointed, he said. I gave you one hint. I told you that the threat had already revealed itself. I told you that everything you needed was visible, and yet not a single one of you found the correct answer. Confusion rippled through the room. Not a single one? That meant the Kreth was wrong. The Dren was wrong. Minho was wrong. Then who? Then stopped walking. He was standing right next to row 3. Cadet Park, he said. Please stand. Yuna closed her notebook calmly and rose to her feet. She stood straight, hands clasped behind her back, face completely neutral. The room erupted in silent shock. Every head turned. Every eye stared. The small human girl from row 3, the one who had done nothing for 3 hours, the one who had just sat there drinking water and writing notes, her? Riven's forearms went rigid. He had walked past her at least 3 times. She had bumped into his desk. He had not given her a single thought. Oris's dark eyes went wide. She had prided herself on noticing everything. She had watched the entire room, and she had never once considered the quiet human in row 3. Taeho felt his stomach drop. He knew her. He had trained with her. He had thought she was his friend, and he had never suspected her for a single moment. Instructor Ven let the silence stretch. He wanted them to feel it. He wanted them to understand. Cadet Yuna Park is the designated threat, he said finally. And during the past 3 hours, while all of you were watching the wrong targets, she neutralized 12 of you. 12? The word hit the room like a bomb. She placed a tracker on Cadet Riven's uniform. She delivered a sedative to Cadet Baek through a piece of gum. She created complete psychological profiles of 6 cadets. She manipulated sightlines, controlled environmental factors, and compromised multiple positions. Then paused. All without any of you noticing. All while you watched the big scary Kreth in the corner. Gorath, the Kreth, let out a small sound of relief. He was not the threat. He was just a nervous student who had forgotten to study. But the relief in the room was mixed with something else. Fear. Every cadet was now looking at Yuna with new eyes. This small, soft human, this average, forgettable girl. She had beaten all of them without lifting a finger. Instructor Ven walked to the front of the room and pressed a button on his tablet. The large screen behind him flickered to life, showing the surveillance footage from the past 3 hours. Every angle, every moment, every mistake. Let us review, Ven said. Pay close attention. You will learn more in the next 10 minutes than you have in the past year of training. The footage began with the start of the exam. 200 cadets sitting in their seats, ready to begin. The camera zoomed in on row 3, seat 14. Yuna was sitting perfectly still. Her posture was relaxed. Her face was calm. She looked like any other student. First, Ven said, notice the water bottle. The footage showed Yuna placing her water bottle on her desk. It seemed like nothing, just a student putting down a drink. She placed it exactly 3 centimeters from the edge. This specific position created a reflective surface that allowed her to see 9 cadets behind her without turning around. A simple trick, but effective. The cadets in the room stared at the screen. They had all seen her water bottle. They had not thought anything of it. Next, the pencil sharpener incident. The footage switched to show Yuna walking toward the pencil sharpener. As she passed Riven's desk, her hip bumped against it slightly. Watch closely, Ven said, slow motion. The footage slowed down. Now they could see it. As Yuna bumped the desk, her left hand moved underneath. A tiny motion, almost invisible. She attached something to the underside of Riven's desk. A tracking device, Ven said, smaller than a grain of rice. It would have transmitted his location for 48 hours. If this were a real mission, Cadet Riven would have been followed, captured, or killed without ever knowing why. Riven's forearms dropped to his sides. He felt sick. He had been so confident, so certain that he knew what was happening. And the whole time, she had been playing him like an instrument. The gum, Ven continued. The footage showed Yuna offering gum to Minho. Her smile was kind. Her gesture was gentle. She looked like a caring friend. The gum wrapper contained a contact sedative, Ven said. Harmless in the test environment, but in a real scenario, Cadet Bake would have been unconscious within 40 minutes. Minho touched his throat. He still had the taste of that gum in his mouth. He had been grateful to her. He had thought she was being nice. Social engineering, Ven said, the most dangerous weapon of all. She did not use strength. She did not use technology. She made him trust her, and that trust was his weakness. The footage continued. Every small action that Yuna had taken was highlighted and explained. The way she tied her hair back, it cleared her peripheral vision and allowed her to see more of the room. The way she yawned, each yawn was exactly 4 seconds long, giving her time to assess the breathing patterns of nearby cadets. The way she stretched her arms, each stretch was a different angle, designed to check different areas of the room. The way she adjusted her seat, she had positioned herself in the optimal location for escape. 3 steps to the emergency exit. Clear path. No obstacles. The way she wrote in her notebook, every page was a psychological profile. Complete analyses of multiple cadets, their patterns, their weaknesses, their predicted behaviors. She knew what Cadet Oris would do before Cadet Oris knew herself. The profile she created had a 94% accuracy rate. That means if she needed to manipulate Oris, she would succeed almost every time. Oris felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had been so proud of her observation skills. She had thought she could see everything, but she had never seen the real threat sitting 3 rows in front of her. Then paused the footage and turned to face the cadets. Let me ask you a question, he said. Why did you all choose the wrong target? No one answered. You chose the Kreth because he was big and scary. You chose the Dren because shapeshifters are dangerous. You chose Cadet Bake because he was nervous and sweating. Ven shook his head slowly. You chose based on what you expected to see, not what was actually there. He pointed at the frozen image of Yuna on the screen. Humans are small. Humans are physically weak. Humans cannot see in the dark. They cannot regrow limbs or change their shape. By every measurement, they are the least impressive species in this alliance. The room was completely silent. And that is exactly why they are the most dangerous. Ven let the words sink in before continuing. For thousands of years, humans were not the strongest creatures on their planet. They were surrounded by predators with bigger teeth, sharper claws, and faster legs. They should have died out. They should have been eaten. But they survived. Do you know how? No one answered. They learned to hide. They learned to wait. They learned to think. They developed something that no other species in this galaxy has truly mastered. The ability to be invisible. Not through technology, not through biology, through behavior, through the simple act of making you forget they were ever there. He turned back to the screen and pressed play. The footage showed the entire 3 hours compressed into a few minutes. Cadets looking at the Kreth, cadets looking at the Dren, cadets looking at Minho, cadets looking everywhere except row 3. 200 of the galaxy's best young soldiers, Ven said. 3 hours of observation, and not one of you looked at her for more than 2 seconds. She was never hidden. She was sitting right there in plain sight, and you could not see her because your brain told you she was not worth seeing. Gorath the Kreth raised one massive claw. Sir, if humans are so dangerous, why do we not know about this? Why is this not taught? Ven smiled. It was a cold smile. Because, Cadet Gorath, humans prefer it that way. The less you know about what they can do, the easier their job becomes. He glanced at Yuna, who was still standing calmly in row 3. Is that not correct, Cadet Park? Yuna did not smile. She did not react at all. She simply nodded once, her face completely neutral. That single nod was more frightening than anything else that had happened in the past 3 hours. Because it confirmed everything. She was not pretending. She was not acting. This was who she really was, a weapon in human form, and none of them had ever suspected a thing. The examination ended, but the silence continued. Cadets filed out of the hall in small groups, whispering to each other. They kept glancing back at Yuna, who remained in her seat, calmly packing her notebook and pencil. She did not look at any of them. Evening came to Station Helix 7. The artificial sun dimmed, and the stars outside the observation deck windows grew brighter. Thousands of points of light spread across the darkness of space, each one a distant sun with its own worlds, its own stories. Yuna stood at the window, watching the stars. She was alone, or at least she thought she was. How long have you known? The voice came from behind her. She did not turn around. She recognized it immediately. Tejo stepped out of the shadows and walked to stand beside her. His face was a mixture of confusion, hurt, and something close to fear. 6 months, he said. We trained together for 6 months. We ate together. We talked together. I thought I knew you. He paused. I thought we were friends. Yuna was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. We are friends, Tejo. Friends don't lie to each other. I never lied to you. She finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were calm, but there was something deeper there, something sad. I just never told you the whole truth. Tejo shook his head. The girl I knew couldn't run a full lap without getting tired. She struggled with basic combat drills. She got average scores on every test. He stared at her. That was all fake? Yes. The simple honesty of the word hit harder than any explanation. Why? Tejo asked. Why pretend to be weak? Why hide what you can do? Yuna turned back to the window. The stars reflected in her dark eyes. Humans are not the strongest species in this galaxy, she said. We cannot fight a Kreth in hand-to-hand combat. We cannot outrun a Torak. We cannot see through walls, or change our shape, or survive in the vacuum of space. She paused. But we learned something that other species never needed to learn. What? How to disappear. Yuna's voice was quiet, almost gentle. When you are small and weak, you cannot win by being noticed. You win by being forgotten. You win by making everyone look somewhere else. You win by being invisible. Taeho was silent, processing her words. Every species in this alliance judges threats the same way, Yuna continued. They look for the biggest claws, the sharpest teeth, the most aggressive behavior. They never think to look at the quiet one in the corner, the one who smiles and offers gum, the one who bumps your desk and apologizes. And that makes you dangerous. That makes us survive. Footsteps echoed behind them. Admiral Sohn walked onto the observation deck, his metals catching the starlight. He stopped a few meters away and nodded at both of them. "Cadet Kim," he said, "I understand you have questions." Taeho straightened up. "Sir, I just want to understand what happened today." The Admiral moved to stand beside them at the window. For a moment, he simply looked at the stars. "The Galactic Council has never trusted humanity," he said. "We were admitted to the Alliance because we had something they wanted, our adaptability, our creativity, our willingness to go places other species would not go. But they have always seen us as the weak link, the species that needed protection. And today? Today was a test they designed to prove we do not belong in the vanguard. They wanted to show that human threats could be easily identified, that we are not subtle enough, not skilled enough to operate at the highest level." The Admiral smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They failed. 200 cadets from 12 species, 3 hours of observation, 0 correct answers. The Council wanted proof that humans are weak. Instead, they got proof that we are invisible. Taeho looked at her. "Is that what you are? A weapon?" Yuna was quiet for a long moment. When she answered, her voice was different, softer, more human. "I am what I had to become." She finally turned to face him fully. "When I was 16, my home was destroyed. 3,000 people lived on Kepler 7. After the attack, 47 survived. I was one of them." Taeho's eyes widened. He had heard of the Kepler 7 massacre. Everyone had. But he had never connected it to the quiet girl he trained with. "I spent 11 days hiding in the ruins," Yuna said. "Raiders were hunting survivors for sport. I had no weapons, no training, no help. I should have died." Her voice was steady, but there was something raw beneath the words. "I did not die. I adapted. I learned to move without being seen. I learned to think like the hunters so I could avoid them. I learned to be invisible. And now I use what I learned to protect others, so they never have to learn it the way I did." The observation deck fell silent. The stars continued to shine, indifferent to the small dramas playing out beneath them. Admiral Sohn checked his tablet. "The Vanguard recruitment list has been posted. Cadet Kim, you should see it." Taeho hesitated, then looked at Yuna. "Are you on it?" She shook her head. "Look for yourself." He pulled out his tablet and opened the list. His name was there, near the middle. But at the very top was Yuna's name, with a special designation next to it. "Exempted. Prior qualification. What does that mean?" Taeho asked. Admiral Sohn answered. "It means she was already qualified before this exam began. It means her real record is classified beyond anything the Academy has access to. It means," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "it means she was never really a cadet at all." Taeho stared at the screen. Then he stared at Yuna. She smiled. It was a small smile, almost shy. For a moment, she looked like the girl he had trained with for 6 months, the one who struggled with laps, the one who got average scores, the one he thought was his friend. "Goodbye, Taeho," she said. "Train hard. The galaxy is more dangerous than you know." Then she walked away, her footsteps silent on the metal floor. She did not look back. Taeho watched her go until she disappeared into the shadows of the corridor. Admiral Sohn stood beside him, looking at the stars. "There is an old human saying," the Admiral said quietly, "the nail that sticks out gets hammered down." "I know it." The Admiral continued, "What people forget is the second part of that saying. The nails that stay hidden are the ones holding the hammer." He patted Tejo on the shoulder and walked away, leaving the young cadet alone with the stars and his thoughts. Somewhere in the station, Instructor Ven sat in his office, reviewing the exam results one final time. The data was clear. 200 cadets, 0 correct answers. One human girl sitting in plain sight for 3 hours, and nobody saw her. He closed the file and leaned back in his chair. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for centuries. They had laughed at the small, soft creatures from the blue planet. They had called them weak, fragile, harmless. But now the truth was in the data. The most dangerous predator is not the one with the biggest claws. It is the one you never see coming. The one who sits in row 3, drinking water, writing notes, looking completely ordinary. The one who smiles at you and offers gum. The one who is already gone before you realize you were never safe. That was humanity's secret. And now, finally, the galaxy was beginning to understand.